you clack.
No, I don't want to do it now.
No, you've got to clack.
I don't want to do it.
I don't want to clack now.
Okay, you all do it.
All right.
Ready, go. Ow. I'm Amanda Lawrence. I'm part of the Cadarn scrutiny team, and I'm the chair, and I'm a Newydd tenant, and I work with Newydd and Cadwyn tenants.
And I'm Jason Rowe. I'm Chief Exec of Cadarn Group, which is Newydd and Cadwyn. All Welsh housing associations are regulated, and as part of that regulation, we have to do an annual self-evaluation, self-assessment, where we go through the regulatory judgments and assess ourselves on our performance on that. In Cadarn, the approach we take is to go through that self-assessment with tenants and the scrutiny group first to get their views on whether we comply, and then after that, that information is taken back to the board, and then the board use that to decide overall whether we comply. Previously, we would ask the tenants to come along and assess our self-evaluation, but there's an awful lot of the regulatory judgments that, quite honestly, it's unfair to ask tenants to make an assessment on. One example that I always use is our assets and liabilities register, something that is just so complex and really doesn't directly necessarily impact tenants, and yet we're asking tenants to make an assessment on whether we comply or not. So what's been really interesting is the Cadarn Tenant Scrutiny Group have developed a slightly different way of doing it. So for judgments where you can very clearly see the impact on tenants, they will give either a comply or a don't comply or a partial comply. But for judgments that might be a bit less removed from direct tenant impact, they will use trust comply, which basically means that the management have explained to the tenants about how we do things, have demonstrated that what is required is there, and the tenants have said, well, we trust you that you are complying then. So the regulator accepts those and I think appreciates that we're not trying to pretend that tenants are saying comply to everything, because I don't think that's really true. So there is trust comply in the areas where it might not be a particularly tenant-facing service.
As tenants, the idea of having a trust comply is great because there is so much technical knowledge, so much technical language, and we're talking so much in-depth information that, to be honest, it would be overwhelming. To most tenants, I would be overwhelmed, and I'm an involved tenant. So I think it's a really great and useful tool to be able to say, okay, we trust that you are doing what's required, or you're working towards what's being required. Obviously, we're still going to keep an eye on you because, don't ever trust anything 100% without making sure the safety net's there. But it's a great way, but it's really, really important that when you have trust comply as an option, you've got to be able to trust your landlord to begin with. And I'm lucky, I have a great relationship with my landlord. I know my landlord, no landlord is perfect, but I know my landlord is still trying to be the best they can. And I know they are trying to do everything they can to be that best. So trust comply for me is a great option of being able to say, we can see you're working towards it. You've explained what your aims are. You've explained what decisions are involved, to why you're working that way or why something isn't happening. So it's about the honesty and the clarity, and it's never to assume just because it's trust complying now that we're going to say next year, oh, you haven't moved any further. No, you've got to prove that you're still building towards that proper full compliance, because we're trusting you on that journey.
As a tenant, if you want to find your landlord's self-assessment, they have to be published on the website, but they tend to be 20, 30 pages long. A number of organisations have tried to make them far more readable. They are not the most exciting read. So I would encourage people to get in contact with their tenant liaison officer, whoever that may be, and join in the process. But you might have some other ways of getting involved.
When it comes to actually accessing information from the assessments, I would love to see a much easier, plain English version available for tenants, cutting out so much of the business speak or the bits that don't really impact us, making it more accessible, because I think these could be really important tools to be able to use a tenant from one landlord to compare the reality of what their landlord actually is to what they're saying, and compare them to other landlords. And it would be a really great way, if the system is built up to that level, of the more that is shared and open between tenants around Wales, the better the voice, because we can compare and say this is what should be our basic minimums and pull you up to scratch. And that's what I think it's all about, isn't it? It's not just about ticking boxes and making yourself look good, report to the Welsh Government. It's about proving you've done the right things.
If you want to read what has happened in the associations, then you can go on the website and you can read what's happened in the past year. But far more important would be to get involved with the assessment as it's going forward for the next year, and to be able to be part of that assessment rather than just reading a very unreadable 20-page document on a website. So get involved early.
As a tenant, I would say if you want to know about yesterday, read the document. If you want to be part of changing tomorrow, get involved today. And yes, you'll see tenants such as myself and others that can take a little bit of time, but there are great short snips of ways of being involved. Landlords will do quick little questions out. TPAS Cymru does events such as Tenant Pulse and stuff like that. So there are great ways of being able to get your voice out there, either directly to your landlord or on a national scale. But the point is you can do as little as you like or as much as you like, but it's really important. Please do something, be part of the solution, get your voice out there, get your opinion out there, because every little bit will help make the changes better for the future.
This process wouldn't work at all if we did this as a one-off exercise once a year in a room with 20 tenants. This absolutely relies on having a relationship with the tenants throughout the year so that there's no surprises during that discussion, and that there's no requirement to sit there for 6-8 hours trying to go through every single piece of huge amounts of evidence, that there's a relationship beforehand which can then easily demonstrate where we're performing well, where we need to improve. And it's easy then for the tenants, or relatively easy, for the tenants then to be able to give an opinion on the judgments.
As part of how we work as scrutiny and being supportive and also involved is, as I said, it's not a one-off project in a year. We have meetings, we have face-to-face, we have hybrid, we have online, and we make sure they're at different times and options, because we need to be as inclusive as possible, and that makes, including times of working people doing school runs aren't being ruled out. So we try to make sure that we make it as accessible as possible for all tenants to be part of it. It's a constant open communication both directions. We're not just getting bombarded with information or this is the things you need to know about. It's also the other way back.
My advice to people who are looking at improving their self-assessment is that it's absolutely fantastic to get tenants involved. It's what the regulator wants. But there's no point doing that in one big blast once a year and trying to expect tenants to genuinely go through every single thing about the entire operation of housing associations in 1-2 hour meeting. And it requires a evolution of tenant engagement throughout the year so that meeting is no surprises. It's almost like the culmination of the engagement that's gone throughout the year that leads to a very reliable and a very simple system of self-evaluation.